Recently, I came across a handcrafted sea glass beaded garland on the Pottery Barn website, but it was $99, and I knew that I could easily dupe it myself. So I'm going to be using some matte Mod Podge, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to dump a generous amount of the Mod Podge into a plastic container. Next, I added in some food coloring. So to get the sea glass color, I used blue and green, and I added just 1 drop of each color of the food coloring. And then using a wooden popsicle stick, I mixed it fairly well into the Mod Podge, making sure that there were no marbling techniques left in, that it was fairly well mixed. To thin it out just a little bit, I added in just a drop of water just to make sure that I could get the Mod Podge to swirl around inside the glass beads. Next, I used a measuring cup and I poured the Mod Podge mixture into a measuring cup just so that it would pour out easily into my glass beads. The opening on these glass beads is quite small, so I needed all the help I could get getting the Mod Podge in here. This is a very messy DIY, so I opted to wear latex gloves as well while I was working. I used a paper towel to wipe off any excess Mod Podge on the outside of my glass bead because I didn't want that to harden on there. Once I filled all my glass beads, I stuck them onto wooden barbecue skewers and then placed them into some styrofoam. This is just so that all the excess Mod Podge can drip out through the opening of the beads, and I let these set here for about half an hour. Then I took a baking tray with some parchment paper and I placed the glass beads onto the baking tray, and then I placed them in the oven and baked them for about an hour at 200 degrees. Once they were done in the oven, I did let them cool down sufficiently, leaving them for a couple hours so they weren't hot to the touch. Then I took a twine rope and I placed some tape around the end just so that I could thread it on easily onto a needle. I used a yarn needle with quite a big opening so that I could slide the twine through. It is a little tough to get the twine through, but the tape does help. Once I had my needle threaded through, I took one of my glass beads and I threaded it on. So just poke the needle through both ends of the glass bead, slide it through, and then when I get to the end of my twine, instead of just tying just a simple knot, I actually did a couple knots, and then I also did a loop. So I have a loop hanging off the end of my twine so that in case down the road if I want to hang this up on any of my decorative shelves with hooks, I can also hang this as well as lay it flat in any decorative bowls and dishes. So just have my hoop there and then push the bead all the way down to the end. Then I continued sliding on beads and tying knots in between each bead. I did 3 knots in between each bead to make sure that my glass beads wouldn't slip through any of the knots and touch any of the other glass beads. I tried to make them as uniform as I could, but they're not all exactly even. But I just continued doing it in this fashion, working until I threaded on all the glass beads onto my rope. When I threaded on my very last bead, I made sure I tied 3 knots as well and then finished it off again in a loop just like I did on the other end. And then all I had to do was cut off the excess twine, and then my sea glass beaded garland is complete. I went ahead and set it up in my home here in a nice decorative wooden scoop bowl, and I think this just adds such a nice nautical feel to the room. And what I'm most happy about with this DIY is that I was able to take something that was extremely expensive from Pottery Barn and put my own spin on it, make it in my own style, and save a ton of money. Thank you so much for tuning into Hometalk, and we'll see you on another video.
Obviously, the first thing you need to do is remove the labels from the bottom. I'm using a razor knife. If you don't feel comfortable using one or don't have one, you could always soak these to get the labels off. Once you do get the labels off, don't worry too much about the gunk on the bottom. We're going to clean these later after a couple more steps. So the next step is to mark the center of your bowl because we're actually going to drill a hole in them. I'm using what's called a combination square to just set the center, but then I'm going to show you how you could also do it without one. So first I do it vertically, then I do it horizontally. But another way you could do it, because it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, is you just take a ruler. This is about 3 inches across, so you just go ahead and mark at the 1.5 inch and then do it this way and mark as the 1.5 inch as well. Okay, let's go drill some holes. Okay, we're out here in the freezing cold rain because we're gonna drill some holes in each of the bottoms of the bowls. So you need a couple things. You need a drill with a special drill bit that's meant for cutting glass and tile. Then you need to drill a hole the same size in a scrap piece of wood, and we'll show you why in just a second, because that's going to help to hold it steady. Also, it's a two-person job, so my husband's going to do the drilling. You need to wear gloves if you're going to be holding the glass, and I am going to be pouring water on it because you need to pour water over a glass when you're drilling it. Ready? Go. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is rinse these out. You want to be careful because it could be a little sharp around the edge. You just want to make sure you get all of the glass out and clean. And then if you've got some of the label residue on the bottom, I actually just take a pot scraper and you can just give it a little bit of a rub, and that's going to wipe that right off. You rinse all these and we set them out to dry. So now we're ready to put holes in our base. The most important part is you need to have a hollowed out section. We were able to find this, it's listed as like a wood planter or wood tray pretty inexpensively. You could also really quickly just put together like a little box without a lid, obviously made out of wood. But I'm going to flip it upside down and I'm going to line up my bowls and then mark where I want them to be. And this one, depending on like the length of your bowl or the piece of wood that you're using, I'm just eyeballing it because also, you know, just in case the holes we cut out of the glass aren't perfectly centered. So you just eyeball it to where you want it. And then you're just gonna take a pencil and mark the circles. Here's a helpful tip. This is an awl, but you can use a nail. You just want to go into your circle and just poke a little hole, and that's going to help your drill bit stick when you start. Okay, we've got all our holes marked and awled, and now I'm going to drill. This is one of my favorite tips. If you are using a drill bit and you don't want it to go too far, obviously I don't want it to go into my mat or into my table, I'm just using a little piece of tape, and that's going to tell me when it's okay for me to stop. So let's do some drilling. Okay, so we finished one. Now we're going to drill the other holes and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, now we're ready to paint. You've seen this before. It's just a piece of spare wood with some dowels in it that we've used for painting bottles before. I'm going to use it for these bowls. We're using sea glass paint. Couple quick tips. You want to do it very lightly, only do one coat, and then take a look and see how you like it. It's gonna just give a little tint of color, but you don't want to overdo it. Okay, so I've painted all my bowls. I've set them where I want them to go on my stand. Now I'm gonna take them off individually and use some Beacon multi-grip on the bottom to hold the glass to the wood. So you just want to put some around the hole. And you want to be careful not to get it too close to the edge because remember that's going to hang off a little bit. Put it back on and press. Make sure it's lined up where you want it. And then you're just going to move on to the next one, and we're going to do this for all 5, and we're going to give it about 20 minutes to dry. Okay, now we're ready to add our fairy lights. I've already unrolled them. I'm going to turn them on so I can see them a little bit better. I'll be able to hide the battery pack underneath once I've threaded them all through, but I'm just going to do one bowl at a time. I'm going to start threading it and pull it through until I get it all the way in. And the reason I'm doing fairy lights and the reason we put the holes in is number one, we've got dogs, and so if I have this on a low table, I don't want our dogs to knock into candles. Also, when we have our friends' kids over. But I love that you can replace these. You can also add some greenery in here or add a faux candle or add something else, and you're just going to be able to take the fairy lights in and out as you like. So I've filled one. I'm going to fill the other 4, and then we'll be ready with our finished project. And voila, we've got our finished project. I'm just adding a few touches of greenery. That's one of the things I love about this. The only things that are permanent are the base and the globes. You could put actual candles in here. You could switch out the greenery in between. You could add Christmas lights in the winter. You could hot glue seashells. Whatever you want to fit your home decor, this project is going to make it happen. This is Beth from the Kingston Home signing off. I'll see you next time.